It's probably the students.
I'm just trying to figure out how it is. Do you guys need more room?
No, I'm fine.
Amy, brace your posture.
No longer in the arrow.
Not that I didn't want to embrace too many.
You can open my setup, yeah.
Just organize my sign. All right, everybody, so we are gonna get started. Welcome. Call the meeting to order, at 6:00 PM. Thank you, Mr. Gleason, for taking our notes for us. Appreciate that. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. You guys can rise and recite along with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Alright, so our next item on the agenda is public comment. We do not have any public comments this evening, and so I am happy to say that we're going to begin a small training for the school committee. We have MASC's Tracy Novick here with us tonight. And I'm going to actually turn this over to Mike to do a little introduction because this is coming through the Budget and Warrant Subcommittee and your goal setting for the committee.
Yep, so we've had a couple new members of Budget and Warrant come on board, and they've rightfully asked some questions about procedure, about warrants, what the signature confers, why we need both signatures and a vote to approve the warrants. And so I reached out to MASC, our governing body. Tracy gracefully offered to provide us with a training. We had a conversation late last week, I believe, where I passed along some of the questions that I recorded from our meeting. And so hopefully, well, like you said earlier, it either answers a lot of questions or it generates a lot more questions.
Or maybe both.
Or maybe right.
So while we're loading some slides, just briefly about me, I am actually not your field director. I'm just sort of over the line because you're actually in Dorothy Presser's territory, but I'm the Central Mass field director, live in Worcester, serve in the Worcester School Committee, and also serve in my licensed school business administrator. But honestly, I have to confess, I always feel like I'm coming home when I come to Neshoba because I'm actually a Sterling kid. So this is much closer to home than I usually am. And in terms of this, I will say that I always laugh internally when we do charting the course with new members. We do budget and finance, and we get to the slides on warrants, and everything just stops dead. Like, we're flying through, budget process and how this works and revenue and all this kind of thing, and then like everything grinds to a halt. So this is not surprising. This is often something that people have questions about, honestly, in terms of the slides, which I'm happy to share with you, really, this is just to give us a couple of things to look at together. As far as I'm concerned, this is mostly about making sure that your questions get answered. As Mike indicated, he and I had a conversation about some of the questions that were arising through your subcommittee. But I do want to note to you, I work with school committees, but I also was originally trained as a high school English teacher, and I have 3 teenagers at home, so I'm very used to being interrupted. You will not throw me. So you should actually stop me at any time if you have questions about what we're talking about. So this is effectively just sort of, I thought about, what do you call this, and what about warrants? What is it that we're doing here? So we can go to the next slide. Effectively what I'm doing here just on this slide is just sort of outlining what exactly is your fiduciary responsibility, right? So this is high level, this is chapter 71, this is what are the 4 main jobs of the school committee, and if you've been through training or been doing this for a bit, are well familiar with, we've got goals, we've got policy, we've got hiring and evaluating the superintendent, and then the other thing we've got is budget. And effectively the authority for the school committee, and this, by the way, is per DOR decision dating back to 1994, coming out of the education reform law, is that school committee approves the annual budget along with resulting transfers over the course of the year and other appropriations as needed at the cost center level. And what that's a sort of a term of art. What am I talking about when I say the cost center level? Generally, cost centers, and my understanding is that this is in fact, analogous to what you do here. Cost centers generally are equivalent to, but need not be identical to, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education's chart of accounts, right? So they've got this list of about 13 accounts. That's how school districts in Massachusetts report their spending to the state. That is at about the level that you should be actually passing your budget. And I should note, by the way, that I'm happy to share these slides with you, so by all means take notes, but don't feel like you have to write everything down. There is no legal binding in terms of you have to pass your budget that way. What I always say is that how you decide your cost center should really be a matter of local agreement, really, between the administration and the school committee to make sure that, and this is really that last part, that the work of the district can move forward without constant need of having to go back to the school committee for budgetary transfers, while at the same time there's enough transparency within those cost centers, thank you, such that the school committee can be sure that assets that you have allocated are being used in pursuit of agreed upon goals, right? So the budget and the goals need to go together. Budget is in support of your goals. You need to be knowing over the course of the year that as the budget is being spent, it is actually being spent in line with the goals that you've actually set for the district. The transfers that you have to have over the year, and again, this was confirmed by DOR decision back in '94, are required to be done by vote of the school committee. And that's, again, keeping things at that cost center level. Things that, so I used to say, school committee doesn't get to decide if you're buying pens or you're buying pencils. Now it's more, you're not getting to decide if you're buying iPads or Chromebooks. Nonetheless, the thing is this, but if you're going to go from buying Chromebooks to employing a teacher, that's probably going to involve a cost center transfer. Now, that's not about warrants, but it's to give you an idea of sort of what's the overarching level at which most of your authority lies. So in terms of what warrants should be, imagine a perfect reality, right? Warrants should be a system in which the committee understands what it's signing. This is always my first principle, while allowing for the timely payment of bills in a process that's efficient for the school business office. Because you do need to remember, at the end of the day, warrants are about actually paying the bills of the district. And that's obviously something that everybody who's sitting here has an interest in having happen, right? So that's really what the warrants are about, is making sure that that happens. One of the things that I always emphasize to school committees, though, is that the process has to work for everybody involved. So I sometimes get very excited school committee members who say, well, we should have this, and we should have this, and we should have this. And while I am, as the person who handles school finance for MASC, the one who occasionally will get the call 48 hours later from the business office saying, you told them what? Mm-hmm. They're always very polite. But you need to make sure this is actually going to work for everybody. Okay? So that's, again, another one where making sure that the process is something that flows in terms of the bills actually being paid, is something that the school committee understands, which is important, and also then actually gets the work done over the course of the time it needs to get done during, is really what this is all about. So what does that end up meaning? So here's really the crux of the matter, and this is small because I wanted to make sure that you actually had the full text, okay? This is Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 41, Section 56, which is actually the warrant section, okay? It actually technically exists in two places. There's a section that sort of is more general, there's a section, but it says the same thing. What is it? And I broke it up into these 5 sections because effectively there's things that are happening in each of these paragraphs that you kind of need to be aware of, okay? So in terms of the first section, this is the, what are we doing here? There is an authorization of expending money, okay? And in order to do that, approval and transmission of all bills, drafts, orders, and payrolls are what's going on. That's the warrant. That's what's happening in this process, okay? So it's saying that you're approving and passing it on to the next section. Now at ground, really what the warrant signing process is about is the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is very specific in making sure that there is oversight and multiple sort of eyes on and hands on any expenditure of public funds, okay? So what you're doing is you're providing a cross-check on things. There should never be a process within any public entity where somebody gets to say we're spending money on this and they're the only person who kind of touches that, okay? So really in terms of what is your job here, your job is to make sure that there's another step in the process where somebody else says, yep, this is a valid expenditure by the school district on something that the school district actually should be spending money on, okay? That's how we end up with people, I don't know, make up whatever you want to. Not spending money on cruises, buying vacation homes, whatever you want. This is not about the fact that you need to go count copier paper boxes, okay? Because sometimes I get school committee members who think, oh my gosh, this means that I need to go make sure that we got exactly. No, you have other people who did that earlier in the process. There actually are checks earlier in the process for that. This is actually this is the bill we got, this is the amount it is, yes, you can actually spend it on that. Now, the second section here is something that was added, depending on how long some of you have served on the school committee. This may not actually have been something that was true when you actually first came on, because this is actually a result of two rounds of changes to the warrant section in 2018 and 2019. You now can designate a single signatory. That was always true of payroll. It now is true of everything. It is entirely up to the school committee, and again, working with your business office, as to whether or not you choose to do that. Okay, so there are a lot of school committees that moved in that direction because payroll obviously was the one that went first because people got to get paid. But then once that actually started to become a regular thing, it was there were more committees that were actually pushing for it, and they're the ones that actually got it through the legislature to say, if we could just have a single person sign, that would actually be much more useful. The thing that I think is actually really important, because sometimes I get the question, okay, well, I don't actually really feel like I can do this. I don't really think that I agree with what things are being spent on or how this is working or however what. Now, I always say, if you don't like the process, bring it back to the table. It's a conversation that you should have as a committee. But do note that, first of all, to answer Mike's question, the signed warrants have to come back to the committee. This is effectively for notification, your first meeting after the warrants are signed. But then the other thing is this separate sentence that exists by itself here, the fourth part, which is, the provision shall not limit the responsibility of each member of the board in the event of non-compliance with this section, okay? So by virtue of serving on the school committee, you are legally obligated to comply with the signing of warrants, whether or not you're the person who's signing. So this is one where you don't really get to duck it. This is part of the job of the committee together. How you choose to allocate the actual signing responsibility is up to you. But together you are the ones who actually hold warrant signing authority and really responsibility. And then the last part is how do you actually make sure this happens? And I think that the language here is what actually leads people to try to go charging off to count boxes of copier paper or what have you, right? Such approval shall only be given after an examination to determine the charges are correct and that the goods, materials, or services charged were ordered, and such goods and materials were delivered, and that the service were actually rendered to or for the town, as the case may be. So this is but how do I know that we got it, okay? And this is how you actually get into the backtracking through. You should have some understanding of what gets you to the warrant, right? What happened before that? There's a PO process, something gets ordered, something gets delivered. There should be a point at which, and I have yet to run into a business office where this isn't the case, somebody takes that order or and compares it to what actually came in and assures themselves that those two things match before the warrant goes to you, okay? So that's actually that question of, okay, you should know, if you're the person who signed the warrant, that there was a step that did happen where that check took place, and then you're getting it after that has happened. And you have some assurance, because you are supposed to have some assurance, that that actually is something that took place, okay? So this is by far the most complicated slide that I have. I'm gonna stop for a second to see if you have any questions. Yeah?
How have you seen business offices handle that last piece that you were talking about? Like, is that something you've had some kind of standard, when we're presented with warrants, is there some kind of standard language that a business office would use to say that, like, I verify that I have, reviewed POs against
No, because by virtue of them putting the warrant forward, that effectively is them saying to you that it has happened.
Okay.
But I do think that it is a fair question for anyone who's new to the process to say, I'd like to have a better understanding of what happens to before the warrant gets to us. I think that's an entirely fair thing. I think that the degree to which there, first of all, is a high degree of training among school business officers in Massachusetts, but also the number of sort of checks and balances that are required along the way, honestly, for any municipal finance system, whether a regional school district or town side, is such that it's happening. I think that it's fair for you as a school committee member to say, can you just let me know what happens before it gets to me? Yep. And the other thing that I will say is I also think that it's fair for you as a warrant signer to say, what I'm getting needs to have some degree of some representation of what it is that we're signing for here. Like, am I signing for the fact that we had a consultant, or we just got a delivery from the stationery store, or paying for the latest electricity bill? I think that that's an entirely fair thing for you to know. And again, warrant processes vary widely, honestly, among districts, but there are some shared practices among MASBO, which is the School Business Officials Organization. So there are resources out there in terms of, this is working, this isn't working, we need some more of this, that's there. Yep, Mike.
Tracy, I know that you and I had this conversation last week, and you brought it up again in the fourth line there. I'm still kind of stuck about, you're saying there's no way to duck this, right?
Yes.
This is sort of our responsibility as school committee members, but what if we're presented with a warrant and we just don't feel like we have enough information to sign off on it? Are we still obligated to sign off?
Well,
or-
so this is actually the part where it gets tricky, right? Which is that by the time the warrant gets to you, the obligation has already been incurred, right? So this is effectively, when you get the warrant, you are paying a bill that has been issued to the district. So I think that if you're not getting enough information, then that's the time to have a conversation as a committee of what is it that we need to have in our warrants in order to feel like we understand, because that's one thing. There's a separate question, and this is of course what it's the worst case scenario that the law is actually designed to prevent, is we get a warrant for something that is illegitimate, right? And that's when, yes, first of all, you don't sign the warrant. You probably raise an alarm among your colleagues and make sure no one else signs the warrant. And then that's when somebody needs to be having a conversation both with the school business official and with the superintendent, probably legal counsel, depending on what it is. That's the worst case scenario of 4156, right? And that's exactly why the signatory power exists. When somebody did go out and, buy a ship or, whatever, a vacation home in Maine, don't sign it, get legal counsel, and then somebody needs to be having a different conversation. Yes. I will say that I have never yet run into that. I have run into places where people have said, where they run into more of the check and balance of the budget and the goals, which is, okay, so we had a conversation when we were setting the budget and we were planning the next year that we were going to buy new curriculum for social studies. And I have yet to see new curriculum for social studies, but I'm seeing all the spending in math. And it isn't that someone then refused to sign the warrant, because that's our purchase had already occurred. But they did bring back to the committee, can we talk about what's going on here? And it was something that where just the superintendent actually hadn't updated them the way that they should have, where there had been some results that had come in, it had been clear, the math department had a conversation, et cetera, and they just needed to bring the committee up to date. That tends to be the one place where I occasionally will see the warrant process flag something that then kicks up another responsibility of the school committee.
Tracy, we
Yes.
have a protocol in our committee where all of us sign the warrant and we do
Sure.
it through DocuSign.
Yep.
Is there a threshold? Is it just a majority of us that have to sign it for it to go into effect?
So this is what the law says, which is remarkable to me, because I've gotten that question before of is there a majority, is there a minority? There really isn't. The only thing the law specifies is that if you're going to have it be one person, that person has to be voted. I know of regionals that have set up a process where they have to have one person from each town. I certainly know of, but the fact that you do it electronically, I can't imagine how you pay bills otherwise. I think is very wise. But no, there isn't actually, the law is silent on that.
And so, so that's weird.
It is weird.
So over COVID, we had one person designated to
Yep.
sign the warrants.
To drive in and do it.
Yes, And that, I mean, what was interesting is that the law actually, the change to the law predates COVID, but I have seen more and more, we saw a ton of committees switch during COVID. I got more phone calls, 2019 is when the second part of the law switched. Spring of 2020, I suddenly started getting, did you say, when you presented to us, didn't you say that we could do a single signer? And that's exactly why. Districts needed it to be able to sign their bills. That, and also I've seen more districts switch to electronic signing. Because there were a lot of ones that were very, very based on paper until then.
Last time around, we got an email saying that they didn't have enough signatures.
Okay.
But do they technically need all of us to sign before they can release them?
Unless you have a policy.
Which we don't.
Or there may also be an internal protocol that has been long since set, and that's a conversation to have.
Okay.
Since
Yeah,
the law is unclear, should we have a policy?
I'm trying to think of what, we don't actually have a warrant signing policy that gets into that. We just have a line in it that says, that sort of allows for the signal signatory or the not. We also have regionals that will then add the line that says, you gotta have one person from each town. No, I think that's a conversation to have with your business office about whoever has hands on the process of, do we need to continue it this way? Do we have any idea what the history is? Where is this coming from? I keep bringing up the fact that regional sometimes will do the one town each thing, just because I know that sometimes that's a question of sort of trust, not at this table, but at the other tables to which you will have to answer. That's the one place that I occasionally will see that flagged.
Okay, thank you. So Joe has a question.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the wording of the statute, and in your experience, at any time, has any of your membership in regards to your regional school districts, or is there any case law that has challenged the wording here? Because I'm looking at this. And
There's a separate one that actually goes that does the regional version.
Oh, okay.
So I pulled 4156 because it does apply across the board. As you probably all know, you effectively operate as a municipality. The language is parallel. It just is specific to a regional school district.
Thank you.
Yes. No, thank you for catching that. I put it up and then I thought, should I give you and then I thought, it's probably good for you to know that this is kind of everybody. But yes, there is, and I should know off the top of my head where it is. And that was actually what was interesting, was that what switched in terms of the signal signatory it was the municipalities that got it first. And then we had this year of the regional school district saying, wait a minute, how come everybody else got this and we didn't? It was because they didn't amend the other section of the law at the same time.
Great. Chandra has a question, yeah?
Oh, yep.
So I'm looking at the actual thing we signed,
Yes.
and it has some language that doesn't seem to line up with that, and all items are properly coded and not in excess of the budget.
Okay. That sounds to me as if you're talking about really policy or procedural language. So I did look at your purchasing policies. I didn't look at your DD, although I think you've done a pretty recent update of your fiscal policies, if I recall correctly. Dorothy was working on that. Mm-hmm. So my guess is that that's where that's coming from. Probably, it may not be your policy. If it's not your policy, it's probably your procedure. Yep.
So this is a detective control because the bills have already been paid at
Yes.
this point.
Or they haven't been paid, but you have incurred the obligation.
Okay.
You've already used the electricity, you've already received the, gasoline, whatever.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think of so I know that I read the payment procedures,
Mm-hmm.
and it said that the invoices and bills should be available to us at any point if we'd like to review them. But is there ever a time when you see school committees just try to randomly select a sample and say, have you actually tied this to a bill?
Not
Or
unless there's a
invoice?
particular reason that you think that the school business office isn't actually doing that part of its job. Because, you also have auditing oversight, you have, this is really more of a delegated authority rather than one where you're going to get into start pulling out bills and doing comparisons.
So What do you see other school committees actually review before signing off on the warrants?
Whatever the documents are that they've gotten as part of the warrants. Which effectively is, this is whatever the obligation is that we've incurred.
Yeah.
Presumably, here is the account or the cost center or what have you that it's coming out of, and here's how much it actually is.
And they just rely on the fact that that's been reviewed by the proper parties beforehand?
Yes, because you are not, that isn't your step of the process, yet that step in the process took place before it got to you.
So I guess why is this a control?
This is the main reason it's a control is for exactly that. Is this actually a cost that should be being incurred by whatever the public entity is at all, right? Did someone go out and do something crazy with your money or not? And by virtue of it actually being, as they note, selectmen, boards, committees, it's actually the public body that ends up effectively being the last step before the money gets released, which I think is deliberate on the part of the Commonwealth to say that, you know, you all answer to the public in a way that effectively no one else in the district does. That's actually the place at which, you know, literally the buck should stop. Yep.
So, I think following up on what Maureen is questioning, like, as school committee members, we get emailed Excel spreadsheets with the warrants, details, where you can see that kind of detail.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get a DocuSign PDF version kind of summarizing the line items from each cost category that we sign off on. But really the only way to see how what you're signing off on, where the details that get to those kind of summary line items is to go into the Excel spreadsheets and look at the line by line invoices, right? So part of our job would be to look at those Excel spreadsheets to make sure that there's nothing out of line, like, you know, a boat or a vacation house or
Well, and that's the
something
thing, right?
crazy
Like,
like
you're,
that.
like, you know that, you know, the gas comes from this company. You know that the electricity comes from this company. When what you're seeing is a series of warrants, I mean, you may well not need to go into the Excel spreadsheet if what you're seeing is a series of warrants of, you've got an order from, you know, Staples, you've got paying the electric bill, you've got paying the gas bill, you've got, right? And of course, most of your costs, as they are for every district, is actually going to be your payroll rather than anything else. That's really, honestly, the level at which your fiduciary authority lies anyway. Unless you're seeing something out of line there, or you're seeing perhaps something that you don't recognize, that's generally the place at which you're actually going to be at leaving your, essentially asserting your authority. Yep.
So I'm just having a hard time following this, right? Because basically what you're telling us is if the information on the spreadsheets that we get, if it's accurate,
Yep.
and we believe it's what things the school should be spending it on, then we should prove it. But I guess the key underlying assumption there is that everything that's on the report has been honestly reported.
And that's true of, and here's the thing that I think that maybe school committees don't always understand. That is honestly true of almost everything that you do. So when we talk, for example, about evaluating the superintendent and at what level do you evaluate the superintendent, most of the work of the superintendent you never see, right? And yet you are the evaluator of the superintendent. That's why we've had this change in terms of how we evaluate superintendents. This is parallel to that, and I think that sometimes school committees get caught in the fact that this looks like we've got this sort of that we're going way back into the process in terms of how this works. And the answer is that no, that your level in terms of budget remains the same in terms of you have cost under authority. That's what you have. That's where your authority lies. Your authority doesn't lie in terms of, well, what was it that they decided to spend money at Staples on? School committees can dive into the weeds really, really easily with warrant signing, and I completely understand why, because the information's all there. But you need to remember that what your budgetary authority was the cost centers that you approved at the time of the budget, the transfers that you actually approve over the course of the year, and that's it. It isn't that you get to then go say, well, why did we spend all this money on pens at Staples? Nope, that's, you gave the superintendent that cost center to spend, the superintendent is spending that cost center. If you want to have that conversation at budget time, you can have that conversation at budget time.
But what I think I'm wrestling with is
Yeah.
the ability to prevent fraud is
Yes.
very limited, given
But
the
that's
information available.
by virtue of you being, remember, it isn't up to you alone to prevent fraud. There's been a bunch of people who have touched this before it gets to you. You are one set of hands in terms of that. You're not any of the earlier sets of hands, and all of those earlier sets of hands are also part of that. So I think and I understand, because as a public body, of course, the buck does stop here, right? You are answerable for that. But all of the earlier parts of this, and I will also say, and as far as I'm concerned, this is why the contract of the school business official remains one that is signed by the school committee. Because there should actually be a relationship between that individual and the school committee. Yep,
So if there is non-compliance or fraud,
yep,
and we've all signed the warrants,
yep.
what responsibility do we bear at that point?
So you are covered by the same kind of thing you're covered by when you're acting in your capacity as a school committee member in any other case. Yeah. So you would end up having somebody dig through kind of where did the line fall, and were you signing things in good faith, given the information that you had or not?
The
Yep.
answer would be yes.
Right, exactly. And one would assume that unless somebody here was somehow, involved in that. But I think that probably is also one where if you've got multiple signers, that seems like a pretty big conspiracy for someone to be cooking up.
Just as a very quick interlude, I want to just keep our eye on the clock.
Yep.
And know that we're trying to learn here, but we're not trying to solve all of our problems. So, which will come later. But I just want to let Tracy kind of continue because she's so many good things.
And I do want to say, I want to note in terms of what is your authority here, right? So in terms of boiling it down, the approve and transmit, which is actually the language right from the MGL, designating a single member if you are choosing to delegate the authority, having assurance that the goods or services were provided, but again, that's the assurance that took place earlier in the process that you're actually getting the warrant as evidence of. You are responsible for making sure that it's available on the next agenda. And then again, that line about understanding that this is a shared legal responsibility in terms of making sure that it happens. Okay? Now I want to be faithful to the fact that I know that there was a question about purchasing. So we can take this one, but then I want to also make sure we talk about that. Yep.
The assurance part
Yep.
is what I'm struggling with a little bit, because what we get, so one, I don't know how to validate that the warrants are complete because there's nothing to reconcile it to.
Right, because reconciliation isn't your job. That happened earlier. That was the matching part of the PO process that took place in the business office.
And then it's just an Excel file. Like,
Mhm.
if someone bought a boat, they could easily change it to like training.
Except that you are signing a warrant that designates what that's going to, right? You are signing something that says we're paying a bill that goes to Scholastic rather than to, I don't know, boat companies, but whatever. Like, and that's where that presumably gets caught.
Yeah, but I mean, a lot of it's generic step fund here. Like,
Yeah, it's going to be for most school districts. At the end of the day, school districts actually don't spend money, and I don't say this to be disparaging, in very exciting ways. Most of what we spend money on, first of all, is people, which is great. But most of what you're going to spend money on is payroll, and then you're paying, keeping the lights on, keeping the buildings heated, making sure the buses are running. If we're lucky, technology, supplies, those sorts of things. So yeah, except for maybe you brought in a consultant, maybe you changed how you're doing school nutrition. Most of those are going to be pretty pro forma. And honestly, your warrants are going to look, your form may look different, but yours isn't going to look all that different from Wachusett's, or going to look all that different from anyone else's. It's going to, this is pretty standard stuff in terms of how we spend our money.
I would argue it's kind of a pointless control to have in place, though, because we really don't have any assurance about anything in the file itself.
Again, the thing that I think is the place where the struggle here is that some of this is about the fact that you have ethical people working for you who have already done their jobs earlier on.
So why can't we just rely on those controls?
Because you're legally obligated to actually sign the warrants. Unless
But-
I should be
but
fair.
I would challenge why.
You
That's
can
my
bring that up with the
challenge.
legislature. But I do think the legislature has a decent argument that the first of all, that I think most public bodies, first of all, would fight to retain this authority because they want to have some ability to actually have some assurance that where did our money go? I can see exactly that it went to the payroll, it went to Scholastic, it went to this, it went to that, it went to this. And I can show you in a public document that that's actually where it went. The other thing is that if you don't have this, you have to have an independent auditor, which is what some cities have. So for example, in Worcester, I don't sign warrants. We have a city auditor who works for the city council. He does not work for the city manager. He is the person who independently checks all of these. And every bill that the Worcester Public Schools pays, all $500 million of them, goes through that office before it goes out again, which isn't necessarily faster than what you do, by the way. Okay, so I heard there was some purchasing questions. So I wanted to make sure, again, this is one where I think school committees sort of see they see the warrant come through, they see the whatever come through, and they kind of see the end of the process. I'm sure that you cannot read this, and that's because it's as long as it is. I intentionally cut and pasted the actual MGL screen that shows you all of the sections of Mass General Law Chapter 30B, which is known as the Uniform Procurement Act, which is how public entities in Massachusetts are required to spend their money. And let me tell you, it's very specific, okay? So in terms of the process through which anytime you're spending money on anything that effectively isn't like a contractual, obligation you have with your union or that sort of thing, at what level do you have to do what particular kinds of things? Do you need to go out to bid? Do you need to have sealed bids? How many different entities do you need to ask for information from? All of this is very specifically outlined in the law. There's no wiggle room. There's no different ways that is actually required. And people who administer purchasing for public bodies are required by the state to actually be trained by the state in order to actually do this, okay? So all of that is happening in that sort of behind the scenes part that you don't see, and it has to. It's required to, again, for any public body in Massachusetts. Now, in terms of the place where you have sort of touched this, whether you know it or not, this is actually covered, and these are actually your policies. I went and found them on MAS's website. In your policy DJ, DJA, and DJE. Okay? Now, coming attractions, because I'm still getting some emails about this one. You may have heard that the legislature actually passed a change to the Uniform Procurement Law in terms of what school districts can choose to do. However, and I keep getting emails saying, how come we haven't gotten a change to our purchasing policies yet? The reason that you haven't gotten a change to your proposed change, ours are always model policies, to your purchasing yet is because the Office of the Inspector General has not yet issued guidance on it. So the law took effect at the end of November. I had a really long conversation with the Office of the Inspector General back in October and said, talk me through what we should be doing in terms of policy. And they said, yeah, we kind of think that the legislature was doing a whole bunch of different things here, and this law is inherently contradictory. They said, it's going to take us some time to sort out how we think everybody ought to be doing this. So I said, okay, so I'm the one who's going to send out a policy, and people are going to, like, when I send out policies, people are like, came from MASC, like, I'm going to be telling school districts how they should spend money. And he said, you really want to wait for us to issue guidance. So about every 3 days or so, I get another email, usually from a business office, occasionally from a school committee member who's been bugged by a business office, saying, how come we haven't changed our policy yet? And the answer is, because the Office of the Inspector General hasn't sent out guidance yet. Okay, so at some point you will see a change to this. Now, what it is it's just the dollar amounts have changed. It is optional. You are not operating illegally if you haven't changed them. It's actually loosening the structure. It's allowing for a greater flexibility for school districts if they choose. Now, I will say, an advantage you have, I think that regionals are probably going to get a little more of the flexibility because municipalities would have to be running two different systems effectively for their school district versus the rest of the municipality. The municipality has to stay at the level at which it already was. So if that has come up, if you don't have any idea what I'm talking about, that's fine. But this actually does spell out. This is the place where the law then becomes the policy. And again, the procedures that exist under this within your business office are significantly more structured because they have to be, because 30B is so, so very specific. Okay? Any questions on that? And I mean, you can go read it. While it's long, it's very straightforward in terms of sort of what it spells out and what the process is. That's what I have. Anything else?
I know you have, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Nope, go ahead.
I know you're time constrained here, but I did have one more question I wanted to ask Ms. Novak. So going back to my original question, and I'm actually going to pose this to you and perhaps also to our business manager, Mr.
Sure.
McCarron. So in regards to the statutory requirements with regards to warrant signing, you had said that there's a parallel statute relative to...
Yep.
Okay. So if I had to guess as to that statutory provision, I would guess that it's section 16A of chapter 71, which
Yep.
reads very similar to
Yeah.
chapter 41, section 56. However, what I note, and again, I don't want to put you on the spot because I know you're a municipal school committee member as opposed to a regional school committee
Yep.
member, but the language regarding our responsibilities to assure that the goods and services and what have you are provided to the district is not found in section 16A.
Yep.
So I understand, there's members of this committee that are, looking to make sure that, we don't run afoul of the general laws. But
Sure.
the Commonwealth compels me to be responsible for this. So I want to be clear of my responsibilities. Am I missing something here?
So you're responsible under 4156 too because you're still a committee.
Okay. So
You get to answer to two sections of
I don't
it.
want to belabor this, but when you say that, what authority you citing? Because if somebody were to suggest that I was irresponsible in my responsibilities, I'm going to argue, so wait a minute, I'm looking at chapter 71, 16A.
Yep.
That's the controlling statute.
If you look at your warrant signing policy, you're going to find that we have cited both sections because regionals are responsible for you're responsible under both 4156 and under 7116.
Okay. And the last
Yep.
question, Madam Chair. How do I know that?
Because you're a committee. Like you're all selectmen, all boards, all committees. So you don't get to duck the municipal ones just because there's a more specific regional one someplace else in the MGL.
Okay. And you say that, and what authority are you relying on in your statement? Because I'm looking at chapter 16A and say, if I were ever held responsible, I'm saying, I'm looking at 16A.
Yep.
16A tells me it says regional school committees.
Yep.
That's what we are.
Yes.
I'm not a town. We don't have a town accountant.
Yep.
We're not rendering service to the town.
Yep.
So without belaboring this, I'm just.
Yeah, I'm telling you that you're a committee. That anytime it says committees, it applies to any school committee in Massachusetts.
All right. Thank you.
And there are other sections in which you're lumped into that where it doesn't get specific into the regionals. Yep. I guess I would say I wouldn't want to commit whatever I'd have to commit and only claim 7116. I'd want to make sure I was aligning this one too.
And our policy links to both.
It does link to both. Yep. Yep, we always have a separate regional policy, and in some cases it's because we've changed the language, but in other cases it's honestly just because you all get an additional MGL.
Of course, Mike.
Real quick, I just want
Sure.
to offer to remain in touch so that we can maybe
Yeah.
get a copy of this
Yes.
slideshow and then maybe your email in case we have
Yep, it's
further
here
questions.
too.
Great.
That's my email and that's my cell phone.
We'll put these in the meeting materials so that you guys can have access to it. Remember that this is only the beginning of this conversation, and I'm so grateful to you, Tracy,
Sure.
for coming out.
I will also say, by the way, that I find that warrant signing, and I meant this in terms of it stopping everybody dead, but I find that warrant signing is the one place where a lot of school committee members who have a lot of concern in terms of making sure they're doing their fiduciary responsibility authentically, feel that there really is a tension, because I do think there is a tension in terms of the amount of detail you're getting in warrants and the fact that what you really have is cost under authority. I entirely agree that there's a tension there. And I think that part of that, honestly, is because some of the warrant signing authority predates education reform, which is what pushed us back up to the cost center authority from individual hiring of teachers, for example, which we go to in New York.
Tracy, to complicate things just a little bit here, I'm sorry, I forgot to ask you.
Sure.
One of our biggest questions is just timelining
Yep.
the process. Is there a place where we can go?
In terms of how long it takes for,
Yeah, so when we are sent the documentation,
yep,
should we be signing, right, so like we've been asked to sign at this meeting ultimately, and that's old school way we used to do it, a stack of warrants would be put in front of us, and we would just sign, and push. And then we approve those warrants in the same meeting.
yep.
That's the way that it should, right, so like I guess I'm just questioning.
So when
the
I
timeline.
sort of shout about this to new members, which some of you may have seen the presentation, which has a lot of capital letters in it, one of the things I always emphasize is there should be a space where you could ask a question if you wanted to about a warrant, however it is that your process works. So if you're getting it electronically, there should be a space between, we've got the warrant, you need it signed, that involves I could pick up the phone and call somebody to say, I don't understand what's going on with this, okay? And that's why I'm always glad not to see the warrants going around the table, because I always just hope that everyone has already seen them a long time, like a week ago, and they already had lots of time to ask the question. But that's really best case scenario. You want to make whatever your process is, there should be a space between we saw it and we had to sign it for I had a question.
And do you recommend putting the warrants into the meeting materials?
There should be something. So it doesn't have to be the full whatever you all got, but there should be, I mean, oftentimes what I see is this is the warrant number, this is the amount of money it was. I will also see in many cases that then actually link someplace else, if you're doing electronically, to the actual whatever the school committee saw. At the end of the day, the warrant is public. And I mean, sometimes I see conversations about how do you make sure that, you know, information that sometimes needs to not be public is actually in the warrant. You know, that's a business office kind of thing. But that tends to be what I see, is you might see a list of, this is the warrant number, this is how much it was for, and it oftentimes then a link, particularly if you're getting electronically, to here's what the full document was.
So that's something for budget and warrant to consider, perhaps.
Yeah. Again, make sure whatever it is works for everybody.
All right, so thanks so much.
You're welcome, absolutely, and I will share that with you. And as I said, if you have questions, please get in touch.
Thank you again.
Fantastic.
Yeah, thank you.
Alright.
That's right.
So, oh, that's fine.
Actually, is it easier if I just leave the thumb drive with you? If there's nothing else on it?
You bet.
Free thumb drive.
I was right. Glenn Kuchar would tell you that there's, I don't know, 5 gig or something. I don't know what's on it, but the only thing that's on it is the presentation.
Wonderful, thank you.
All right, everybody, so that will do it for our warrant training. We have one item on the agenda before we head into executive session, and that is the consent agenda. And so I wonder if Mr. Horish would like to give us a motion.
I'll give you the motion, just correct me if my date's wrong. I want to move to approve the consent agenda of January 4th, 2023, containing the meeting minutes of December 14th, 2022, and the warrants of January 6th, 2023. Did I get those dates right?
Second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Very good. None opposed?
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, sir.
After the meeting, if you could please come sign the documentation for the MSBA now that
Oh,
those minutes have been certified, we submit those as record of the previous meeting.
excellent, sure. All right, everybody, so at this point, we're going to head into executive session. And I will take a motion on that.
Sure, I'll move to enter into executive session to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation.
Thank you.
An open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares. The committee will return to open session at the conclusion of executive session.
Have a second.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
You gotta do a roll call.
Roll call vote. Thank you very much. Mr. Gleason, I'll start with you.
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Sharon?
Yes.
Brett?
Yes.
Chandra?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Karen? Yes. Maureen? Yes. Amy? Yes. Vessels, that is. And Amy Cohen?
Yes.
Very good. We are now in executive session.
I'll see you
Are we
through.
gonna get routing now?
Find the gap.
Are we gonna get rowdy now? Is that why you need?
All right, everybody, we have come back into regular session. Thank you, Brett. Sorry for that. We are back in regular session, and that is for a couple of reasons. Reason number one is we failed to mention who would be attending our executive session, so we're gonna amend our motion in just a moment to go back into executive session. But without objection, what I would like to do before we do that is actually bring forth in the agenda our student representative report, so that Dan does not have to sit in the hallway during our executive session. So Dan, I don't see any objection. All right, great. So Dan, take it away. What's going on in the life of students?
Well, we don't have a whole lot of report because we've just been on vacation for a while, but we did just before the break finish filming the lip dub, and it was edited. It's currently finished. It's going to be released this Friday. So I'm excited to see it. We've been working on that for like months. We also have MLK Day on January 16th, followed by the week of midterms. That is a definite yes on midterms this year. No getting around it. Seniors are starting to get acceptances back this time of year. Myself, not yet, but a lot of people are. We're also looking to get clubs more involved in Stuco meetings. Like we're going to pull maybe the club officer of one or two clubs and add them to the Stuco meeting. So hopefully they can get an idea of what goes on, give their input. Stuco, yeah, I'll elaborate on that. Stuco is basically the student government meeting that occurs to help organize events like this lip dub. That was all done by Stuco. All of the bringing in people to make posters for the lip dub, that was Stuco. Anything like that, that's what Stuco does.
Was it called student council once upon a time?
I think it's one and the same. I'm sure it's somewhere in that acronym. We also have a mascot naming contest somewhere on the horizon. I don't know how it's gonna materialize or when, but it's out there, and that's all.
Dan, you mean that the wolf is going to get a name?
Yeah.
This is awesome.
I'm excited about that.
Oh, man. I have no ideas to give, but I can't wait. Do you guys have any questions for Dan about all the great stuff happening in our high school? Well, Dan, as soon as you hear, you let us know where you're headed next year.
All right, I will do that.
All right, see you later, bud.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
All right, so we're going to try this again to head into executive session. And this time we're going to include the non-school committee members who are going to remain with us. So,
Okay.
By name.
So, part two, I will move to go into executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares. So executive session will include the superintendent as well as members of the negotiating committee, correct, who are Associate Superintendent Laura Friend and Business Operations Manager Ross Mulcairn. The committee will return to open session at the conclusion of executive session.
and I do so declare. Do I have a second?
Well, do we need to say that Mr. Collins is being excluded?
You can have that one.
We will amend the motion that Mr. Collins will be excluded from executive session. Will rejoin us at the conclusion of executive session.
And a second.
Thanks, Amy. All right. Any discussion? All right, we'll do our roll call vote one more time. I'm going to start with Mr. Gleason.
Yes.
Ms. Cohen.
Yes.
Ms. Vessels.
Yes.
Ms. Mazzone.
Yes.
Ms. Devine.
Yes.
Mr. Powell.
Yes.
Mr. Simon.
Yes.
Mr. Collins.
Yes.
Ms. Puck.
Yes.
And myself, yes. Mr. Horsch.
Yes.
We are now in executive So we're back in regular session for the Neshoba Regional School Committee meeting this evening. Thank you very much. We have been shifting our agenda around a little bit, and without objection, we would like to perhaps switch it up a little bit more. Would you like to give the superintendent's report first, Kirk, or do you want to go to the food services update?
I think we may be generating some conversation around the superintendent's report that can get a little lengthy.
Yeah.
But I'll leave that to the chair, of course.
Absolutely, I have no problem. As long as there's no other objections, we're gonna bump the food services update up to our next item on the agenda. Seeing no objection, we will invite our special guests back into the room. Hello. Hi, everybody. Oh, and Brett, of course. Thank you, Brett, for coming back to us.
We missed you.
It's always sad when you go.
What's that?
It's always sad when you go.
Thank you. So just introduce classroom.
All right. So the food services update will be next, and we would like to welcome Mr. Overcash to the desk.
Thank you.
Howard, yes, welcome. I am going to allow Kirk to introduce and set up your presentation.
Well, I think I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Mulcairn actually to do the introduction. Mr. Mulcairn, take it away.
Absolutely. So I believe that you all met Mr. Overcash. Trying to have a seat. Don't feel like you need to stand up. Mr. Overcash last year via Zoom for the food services update. So we prepared some slides to give you an update on food services. I know some questions came through about the breakfast program. So Mr. Overcash prepared to do that and also answer questions at the end. But I always appreciate having somebody, as I'm new, with such a great amount of experience as John has in food services. So,
Thank you. Mr. Overcash, I don't know if the clicker will work on this. Do you want to hit a button or two to see if this is your slide? Okay, yeah, this is in a different format, so I will just do it for you. Just tell me next slide. When you're
Next
ready.
slide. So these are the points I'm going to hit, but of course, I'll entertain any questions that you have. Next. As you all know, meals are all free, both breakfast and lunch this year. Just to give you an update, our average participation for this fall, September, November, is 58%. Prior to that, prior to the pandemic, the participation was in the high 20s, low 30s. So this has been a great, kids are eating, which is important. Okay, kids are eating. It's very, very important. As you can see, it's an increase of roughly 7,000 meals over the last school year, actually the fall of 19, before the pandemic. Breakfast is unbelievable. We served 15,000 meals from September to November this fall. And we weren't even feeding all of the kids. They just started feeding Sawyer, the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders this week. So we'll do, hopefully there'll be more. And we don't have any word yet on continuation of this program. I'm hopeful that the state will continue it as they did this year. I don't see why we don't have the money. I mean, they just gave a big rebate to everybody. If they can do that, I'm sure they could come up with $110 million every year to supplement what we get from the federal government so that we can continue this. And it is really important. The kids need to eat. They do better in school. On the supply chain, we've had minimal interruptions this year, not like last year. Last year was crazy. It was unbelievably crazy. Most of our problems are with variety within certain food groups, like breakfast cereals and things like that. We can get them. We just can't always get the variety that we're looking for in terms of those things. We are still short a couple of staff members, one at Burbank, MRE, and one at Sawyer. It's just one of those things. I think lots of people are short of staff, no matter whether they're in a school or otherwise. We see ads up all over the place. So, what we learned last year on the menus was that breakfast for lunch is an extremely popular item. Okay, we do that basically on Thursdays. It's one of those Thursdays are usually one of the highest meal days of any week. And then Meatless Monday, which we started mid-fall last year, has been well received. It's another very popular meal day. And what we're trying to do this year is just integrate more fresh fruit. We were able to commit $60,000 to the DoD produce program. And that's money that we get through the state and the federal government. And so that's allowing us to provide a lot more fresh fruit to the kids as an option for, instead of canned fruit or whatever. And then we're really trying to work on the menu for early release days to get the right thing. It's been difficult because they don't have quite as much time to eat, and it's a little bit earlier in most cases, so we're trying to find the right thing, because we do see a little bit of a decrease because kids are going home. Basically, just to give you an update on how is the current free meal system working. Last year, it worked basically, the federal government had increased all our reimbursements across the board. So that's how that was working then. This year, we get our basic federal reimbursements, and then the state is adding the money that the federal government isn't giving us. That's where that $110 million that the state needed to pass last summer is going to. So, and what we're getting is we're getting full reimbursement for every single meal. In other words, under the pay system, kids are designated as free, we would get that full reimbursement for each one of those, but now we get it for every student that comes through. So that's how we get our money to pay all our bills and for that. And students do pay, if they want a second lunch, they do have to pay for it. We don't see a lot of that except at the high school, and we do some a la cartes, pizza, smoothies, things like that, mostly at the high school. But there's some availability of that at some of the other schools too. Again, there hasn't been any public discussion on extension of universal free meals. My best guess is we're going to see increase. We saw an increase of about 10% this year across the board on all food services and so forth. My best guess is it's going to be the same thing or greater for next year. We did have a procurement audit this year. We haven't gotten a complete report, but the outbriefing is we were following the rules and doing a good job. And I do have a food service program, what's called program review, which is compliance with all the USDA regulations and so forth. That's the week after Martin Luther King holiday. And I'm pretty confident that we'll do well on that. It's just one day, it's a snapshot in time, and you know, if there's something we're not doing well, we'll fix it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Overcash. That was very informative. I wonder if the committee has any questions.
Yeah, I do.
Go right ahead, Amy.
Yeah, I had submitted a question about the breakfast program that I was hoping you could give some more details on.
Okay.
One of the questions was about where parents might find menus that were available, and how that program is being offered to students if there are no menus available.
One of the things, we had not published a menu because, as I was pointing out, it's very difficult to pinpoint exactly what we're going to be able to serve in terms of, like, if it's going to be a cereal day, what brand of cereal, what variety. So, but what we will do is we'll publish a menu so that people will know if Monday is cereal or Tuesday is going to be a breakfast pastry or something like that. It's unfortunately, because of availability, we don't always know what's going to be. You know, so to put a menu out there saying, you know, Frosted Flakes will be on Tuesday and whatever be on Wednesday could be very misleading. But I think we will publish out a menu that gives a general overview of what the menu is going to be on any given day. I mean, students should be getting fruit and or juice, milk, and then either cereal or, believe it or not, and this is part of the pattern, some type of a breakfast pastry, one of those things. It's very carb heavy is the meal pattern for breakfast. And how it's working in the schools is the teachers poll their classroom the evening before. That information is sent to the cafeteria. Some schools are using milk crates, others are using some other form of a way to pack up all the meals, and then they're picked up in the morning, taken to the classroom. Students eat them at whatever time the teacher provides for them to. Usually it's before school, between the time they arrive and the time classes start. Over at Hale, they still have that time that was their mask break during the pandemic and during when we wore masks. That's when those students have their breakfast. They go to the cafeteria. They're the only ones that actually get to go to the cafeteria and pick up their breakfast. If we had the capability, and I say that's a big if because it would involve so many changes that it's practically, I'm not saying it's impossible to do, but we'd have to do all kinds of changes to bring the kids through the cafeteria, to pick up their breakfast and to eat in the cafeteria more. We could offer a hot breakfast. We could offer a lot more variety, but it would involve staffing, buses, all kinds of scheduling things that probably be very difficult to do. It'd be wonderful if we could, but it'd be very difficult.
When do you expect the menu information to?
I'll have a menu at the end of the week.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
That would be
it's
wonderful.
not a problem.
So I think,
If not tomorrow, I just going to, it doesn't take long.
okay, that'd be great. I've gotten some feedback from parents of younger children who want to help their child be able to make a choice
Mhm.
about
Right.
whether having Frosted Flakes in the morning is a good choice for them.
Unfortunately, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I didn't interrupt you. Unfortunately, because of the way we have to serve it, it's very difficult to offer the choices on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And again, the supply chain is much better, much stronger this year for us, but we're just now seeing a larger variety of some of these types of items, the snack items, the breakfast items coming through.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for coming and for presenting. I know that the universal free lunch or free meal program is very popular, as it should be, including with my son, who we just found out enjoys both the lunch that we pack him. The second lunch provided by.
We have a lot of that, believe me.
Yeah, so thank you for adding about 2,000 extra calories to his diet. I'm wondering, it seems like this program initially came out of COVID as a way to compensate individuals who maybe lost employment or something like that. And I'm wondering, on what basis are we, I mean, it's a great program, but why is the state continuing to fund this, especially if it's $110 million,
Okay.
if situation has changed?
It all has to do with the fact that of being sure that families, children are still getting to eat, because there's still a lot of issues with nutrition insecurity, food insecurity. Matter of fact, the USDA just started a working group on nutrition insecurity nationwide, and have a person in charge of that. And so that's still a big issue with people that, if we look at all the employers that are looking for workers, obviously there's people that aren't working. And if they have children, it just comes down to making sure kids get a chance to eat.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, I know there are children that bring lunch from home and then they come through and get lunch, or they'll come through and get lunch and eat both of them or whatever, but it's not for us to police. We just want to be sure the kids eat. I certainly, the kids here, they get to third and fourth grade every day. So,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Well, I would like to say that breakfast for dinner is also delicious.
We do that in my house frequently.
I'll try to make sure it's not on Thursday. Breakfast all Thursday. Anyway, thank you so much for your
Thank
presentation.
you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right, so without objection, everyone, we're gonna move one more item up here so that our special presenter doesn't have to stay through the whole meeting. There's only one person who likes to do that every week, which we really appreciate. But Mr. Frieswick, we want to put you up front. Is there any objection? No. All right, so Ross, do you want to introduce Mr. Frieswick?
I mean, I don't think Rob needs much of an introduction because he was just here at the last meeting, but obviously this is Rob Frieswick, our facilities director, who's doing an excellent job with all of our buildings and grounds. A piece of the 5-year capital plan that I think both Mr. Frieswick and I want to call out is that you'll see under each one of the sites, there may have been some adjustments from the capital plan that was presented, and I think reflecting back over the vacation, also some conversation with the towns and seeing where things were at, we've made some adjustments. The major piece to this capital plan is under each one of the towns is that existing conditions assessment. So pending the house doctor contract that we're going to be putting out to bid relatively soon, that individual to be able to come in and do an assessment of all of our buildings will absolutely change our projections on capital planning. So this is where things are at today. Obviously, based on what might happen tomorrow in any one of our given buildings, Mr. Friedrich's plan is going to change. But this is our best estimate as of today relative to these pieces.
So Mr. Frieswick, just direct me to how.
Sure, yeah. So, Mary Rollinson and Luther Burbank, like Mr. Mulcairn was saying, the presentation that, that I presented a couple weeks ago, after having conversations with some town administrators, and Superintendent Downing and Mr. Mulcairn, some of the financial impacts on some of these towns was pretty significant, we're going to be asking for a significant amount of money, next school year with the building project. We felt that, trying to spread this stuff out a little bit more to kind of ease the burden on some of these towns. Try to prioritize the projects so that way, things that absolutely have to get done are getting done or going to be asked to get done this fiscal year, and then kind of spread things out after that. We can start Mary Rollinson, Luther Burbank. For this year, we're going to be asking for the replacement of the fire alarm control panel and addressable devices, your smoke alarms, your heat detectors and devices like that. The heating fuel transfer set, pump set. That pump set delivers the heating fuel from the oil tank to the boilers. And that was it for this year. Going forward into FY25, carpeting replacement in the MRE and LBMS office suites. And then in FY26, we would move that project into the libraries to replace the carpeting in the libraries at both MRE and LBMS. Another project in FY27 would be sanding down the hardwood floors in both the gyms at MRE and LBMS, and also the scoreboards in both of those gyms. They're starting to age, and we're having some issues with connectivity with the controllers. Moving on to Center School in Hale. Project this year is the interior doors, classroom doors, hallway doors, things like that. A lot of the doors are starting to fail, fatigue, 20, 25 years old from operations. There's years of not having air conditioning in that building. The doors are starting to delaminate, having a lot of issues with hinges and things like that. By replacing the doors and the hardware, we'll be able to upgrade security. Right now, teachers would have to go out into the hallway to lock doors, which obviously, in lockdown situations, it's not conducive. So that hardware will be upgraded to make it easier for lockdown situations. One of the items that we talked about the last time was the Hale Auditorium rooftop unit. Still waiting for pricing on the compressors, the current configuration that we have right now, the replacements for that. Obviously it's a big price tag to move forward with a brand new unit. During our working group meeting yesterday, I found out that R22 is what it's being used right now. R410A is another refrigerant that's very common in equipment. As of January 1st, 2023, R410A is not to be used in anything being manufactured going forward. So, that's probably gonna have to go back to the drawing board with that. It's still readily available, but the EPA is saying that R410A is not to be used in any HVAC equipment being manufactured, which is kind of concerning. If they're changing these refrigerants frequently, how do we go with a replacement plan across the district without knowing, is it going to be a 5-year solution, 10-year solution, 15-year solution? So that's kind of concerning, on what we do going forward. With the high school project, obviously, we're looking at ground source, water, heat. So, you know, might not be as big of a deal, but some of these other buildings where we have the R22 in our HVAC equipment, what direction do we go, you know, going forward? So, so that's kind of a to be determined at this point. So that would be FY24's ask. FY25, center school, gym floor resurfacing, repainting. And then moving into FY26, the fire alarm panel at Hale, that needs to be upgraded. Also in FY26, the boilers at Hale would need to be replaced. They're all coming up on the 25-year mark. We have had some issues with the boilers at Hale leaking. We've had to do some upgrades there. You know, fortunately, we have natural gas in Stowe, so we can upgrade to really efficient equipment there. You know, get up with that, you know, that 96, 98% efficiency there, which would be nice. You scroll to the right a little bit, Kirk, you know, you just scroll back up.
This way?
Up. Just to show the years.
Oh, yeah.
And then FY27, you scroll back down. Classroom hallway and auditorium flooring replacement at Hale. Again, you know, we're at that 25, you know, plus year mark on that. So, you know, a lot of these building systems are coming to the end of their life expectancy. So, you know, just trying to stay ahead of that before, you know, we have a lot of cracking floors and deterioration, you know, causing, you know, safety issues and things like that. One of the other items that we're looking at, I believe we spoke about this the last time, is the synchronized clock and paging systems. There's a lot of great technology out there now where your clock systems are integrated into a message system. So when we go into lockdown, you know, you'll have basically a TV screen in the classroom as opposed to, you know, your standard analog clock. You know, and you can have preset messages that come up, you know, lockdown situation. You know, you can have your lunch schedule, you know, lunch menus on there, things like that. So those, you know, those are things that we're looking at going forward.
Scroll down to get more sorted.
Yeah. FY24 over at the Sawyer, this is the second phase of the carpet replacement. Last year we did the first floor. Town of Bolton was able to use ARPA money for that. This year it's going to be a capital request. Obviously the air conditioning project that we talked about at the last meeting, that's going to be, you know, obviously that's a big price tag on that. But, you know, it's important. You know, that is the only building in the district that doesn't have air conditioning. You know, we did run into a mold situation a couple summers ago, you know, because that building, you know, in the summertime gets pretty stuffy inside there. So that'll definitely help with overall indoor air quality, you know, and then obviously comfort in the building for, you know, time on learning with the students and, you know, obviously helping the teachers out, you know, with their presentations. Emerson cafeteria sliding doors. There's a couple of sliding doors in the Emerson cafeteria gym that are deteriorating. They're actually separated a little bit. Obviously, you know, it poses a safety issue. We've actually had to stuff some insulation in there to make sure that, you know, rodents and stuff aren't getting in there. So basically taking out those sliding doors, building almost like a storefront, you know, and just having windows, you know, at the 4-foot level. Over here, central office, the fuel tank monitoring system has failed, so that needs to be replaced. That'll help us better monitor, you know, tank levels, and then obviously if there's ever a leak, you know, we can get ahead of it before it turns into an environmental issue. You scroll over a little bit, Kirk. Up a little bit, so I can see the FY25. Again, that's the existing conditions assessment. You know, we won't know a number on that until we go out with the RFQ. You know, and then we can, you know, have a price on that. Emerson flooring. Again, it's at the end of its life expectancy there. That's FY26. This moisture testing will have to be done on the concrete. If there's high levels of moisture in the concrete, that price could go up significantly because there's moisture mitigation that needs to be done in order to put the new flooring down. FY26, I skipped over that. We have to, one of the recommendations from Mass Department of Public Health when they came in a couple summers ago was to remove a lot of the vegetation that's inside that inner courtyard because it's not allowing that area to breathe. It's kind of trapping a lot of moisture in there. There is a small koi pond that's in there, so it's trying to get some of that airflow in there would be beneficial, especially for the classrooms that surround that courtyard area. The Sawyer's gym floor also in FY26 needs to be sanded down. And then FY28 fire alarm control panel over at Sawyer will need to be replaced. And then at the high school, as we talked about the last meeting, we're on a fixed as needed basis right now. Obviously, depending on what happens, in September, that could change significantly. But right now, we're handling it as an as needed basis. We're not going to do anything, cosmetic unless absolutely necessary. These are going to be, absolute needs, just to make sure that we're not just putting too much money into a building that hopefully will be going away at some point in the near future. So, any questions?
Kirk, would you like to elaborate?
Yeah, I wanted to just take a moment to come back to Bolton for a minute. I did have a conversation with Mr. Lowe today in Bolton regarding the air conditioning and Florence Sawyer project. We're both in agreement as we look at these projects, and particularly the price tags, being very cognizant of what we're asking from our towns right now in terms of passing the school budget, but also their town needs, and then ultimately, hopefully passing the bond election for a new high school. So, we recognize that as these capital projects go forward to the towns, we've got to work with the towns and their priorities as well to make sure they're being executed. So Mr. Lowe's been a good partner. We're in good communication with them. So as we look at particularly the large price tag of the air conditioning project, we could potentially see some delays there, but we'll keep that going in conversation.
Scott?
Maybe I missed something, but I was wondering why the Stowe schools, Center and Hale, get a new clock paging system, but the other towns don't.
So I don't want to call it a placeholder, but I'll call it a placeholder for lack of better terms. What we've had multiple conversations about this in our working group is we're going to see what is modeled at the high school as far as a system like that. And once that is picked, whatever model they want to go with, then we'll start branching that out across the district. So that way we're consistent across the district on a system like that. We don't want to have, System A in Lancaster, System B in Bolton, System C in Stowe. So
Then why are you asking Stowe to budget for it, but you're not asking Lancaster?
that was asked. That was in the capital plan, I believe 2 years ago. Principal Grady had brought that to our attention, so I didn't want to take it out of there, and that's why that's still in there.
But I'm still not following. So if you do this, you're going to do it across all three towns, but it's not in all three towns' budgets.
No, but it will be in there as soon as we come up with whatever system that we're going to put in the high school. At that point, all three towns will have that system in the capital plan going forward.
You'll see that in the future, Mr. Powell. It's just that Stowe brought forward the needs for these clocks 2 years ago in the capital plan, so it's sat there. So as we learn more about these systems, they will appear in the other places as well.
It sounds like it's probably not even going to happen in 25. It might even be a little further out, too.
Could be. This is in the 5-year capital plan is always estimates and sort of projections looking down the road of things.
I have a quick question for you, Rob. Can you remind me, you're asking for this Hale Auditorium rooftop unit. If my memory serves, didn't we also vote for this a couple of years ago?
I believe it was 4 years ago, one of the compressors had died, and we replaced that one compressor.
For a similar number, right? Maybe a little smaller? It was a big item.
It was in the $20,000 range for that one compressor.
Oh, I'm sorry. So I was thinking something in the $500,000 range. Was it heater? Was it heater, or am I completely making that?
I've never done any projects that large down there.
No, not PFAS. Nothing like that for the rooftop.
No.
Okay, so, and what you're saying is that this particular item needs to go back to the drawing board before it goes to the warrant in February
Potentially.
because of all of the
Yeah.
EPA changes?
Correct.
Okay. Could it get more expensive?
Could.
Potentially, everything's getting more.
You know, and that's, you know, the TBD for replacing the existing compressors that are in there now. You know, obviously there's a price tag associated with that, but in the short term, that might be the better way to go. Without knowing what the EPA is gonna bring down the road. You know, do we spend $25,000 now, wait a couple more, 3-4 years, you know, 5 years, or maybe we can get 10 years out of those compressors? You know, we don't know. And then hopefully by then they'll have more of a long-term solution on these, you know, on these gases that are being put in this equipment.
Thank you. Any
I
other
think we just added an air ventilation system to the Emerson building.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead, Chandra.
Just a question, as you are moving things to future fiscal years to balance things out, was there any adjustment to cost, assuming things are just getting more expensive in future fiscal years?
Yeah, I
Or are
like to
these
put this-
numbers rough enough that it doesn't really matter?
Yeah, I mean, you try to, I'm not versed enough to put escalation costs in there, so I didn't want to, you know, just throw a number and, you know, have it sit there. You know, and that existing conditions assessment, you know, that we're going to do, you know, those engineers, they can do, you know, the projections, you know, the escalated costs and things like that. You know, so those numbers will be more concrete in the future when we do those existing conditions assessments, similar to like what they did at the high school and what they're doing now, you know, projecting out the cost of construction, you know, 4 or 5 years. So.
And my other question sort of mostly relates, I think, to the air conditioner unit, but perhaps other items. I've noticed that when you put in air conditioning, you put lots of holes in buildings, and it also is a good time to run, I don't know if the paging system needs new cabling or something like that. Is there a part of this process where you look at how these projects interact with each other in terms of impact on the building?
The paging system, clock system, those are all, you know, they're going to run on your Cat 6, you know, so running Cat 6 wire is fairly easy, especially, you know, when you have suspended ceilings and things like that. The VRF system, well, other than this building. You know, the air conditioning, you know, if it's a VRF system, you're running, you know, small diameter copper tubing, so that's minimally invasive, so there's not a lot of, you know, heavy construction going on. You know, you can drop it in on the ceiling deck, and then you can just run it down the hallways, branch it off into the classrooms, you know, and down the wall. So it's not too invasive when you're going with a VRF system. If you're going with a forced air system, obviously you have ductwork, things like that. The Sawyer system, they actually would be removing the what's called the univentilator. That's where all your piping goes through. That's where your fresh air comes in from the outside. They would actually be removing that. Your VRF refrigerant lines would connect to the new univentilator that would go in. It's actually a dual coil system where we could use the VRF system recovery heat pump in the shoulder seasons, you know, late September, October, November, maybe even December if it's warm enough. And then again in March, April, where your boilers you'd only use in the middle of the winter time, you know, your December, January, February, where your VRF systems wouldn't be as efficient. So it'd be a cost savings, you know, or reduction in fossil fuels, you know, putting one of those systems in. So, but that, yeah, as far as construction goes, there's not a lot of, you know, construction with those systems.
Amy?
Yeah, I have a question about central office space. As we're thinking about capital planning, and somebody could remind me whether the new high school is incorporating spaces for central offices within the new high school.
It is not, that would not be reimbursable under NSBF.
So the plan is for them to remain in this building?
Ms. Coleman, what you're directing the superintendent to do is begin a conversation with our builders to include central office space at the high school. I'll be happy to do that.
No, I just wanted some clarification, and as I looked at the
We'll continue to be here.
capital plan, because I didn't see anything laid out for the next few years, and so I didn't know if that was implying that it was going to be rolled over into the new high school. So
I think we're also, this building is included in.
It will be, yeah.
So we will be bringing forward that, certainly, when we hire the facilities doctor.
Got it. Thank you.
There's one piece about Emerson in there. Cafeteria, sliding door removal. So it's in there, but it's like the places where the adults live is not really where we're focusing our resources.
Oh yeah, I just saw, I think I misinterpreted existing conditions assessment for Sawyer Emerson Central Office, and I didn't see anything, any money allocated over the next few years, so, okay.
I'm sure, you know, after we, you know, obviously when we do the existing conditions assessment, there are, you know, definitely be, you know, windows, you know, building envelope things in this, obviously this side of the building are pretty old. So, you know, one thing we'll have to contend with, especially on the original side of the building, I believe it's a historic building, you know, so that kind of limits of what we can do or makes things a little more difficult and more expensive.
Great. Thanks, Rob, so much.
Absolutely. Thanks, Rob.
All right, everyone. So bouncing back in our agenda, we're going to head over to the superintendent's report. And I'll just turn it over to you, Kurt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me get myself reorganized here. Don't mind. Okay, we have several things and to bring forward to you today. First, some announcements. The school building project social media launch happened just prior to break. Ms. Cohen, I believe we're up to around 200, if we haven't eclipsed 200 subscribers to those social media channels, so we'll continue to push that as a major form of communication. We are doing that through a platform called ThrillShare, which is going to be part of the new communications platform. There'll be our website with the Aptigee app and everything, and we're testing the communication features of it with the school building committee project to use that same methodology of communications in the future for the school system. So we're kind of using it as a pilot for our school building committee. Thus far, it's proven to be quite easy to push out these announcements and get information flowing. So more to report back there, and we've included those handles in the report for people to view us and follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. At this point, I'm going to ask Ms. Laura Friend if she can do an introduction for our extended learning update.
I would be happy to do that, thank you. So I would like to welcome Ms. Bridget Hannigan to join us this evening, and Ms. Hannigan is our extended learning coordinator. She's going to provide the committee with an update about extended learning, particularly as it relates to enrichment offerings.
So a pretty quick update. The Extended Learning Program is thrilled to be offering a full roster of enrichment again throughout the entirety of the school year. This fall, our enrichment programming included Imagerina, which is a building-based workshop that kind of creates a real-life video game for students. Additionally, we also offer Drama Out of the Box, which is a drama and improv workshop. Both of those enrichments wrapped up in early December, and they ran across all 4 of our Extended Learning Program sites. Mid-January, we will be welcoming French lessons, tennis lessons, art ventures, and chess wizards to the Extended Learning Program. In an effort to increase the enrichment that we can offer across all of our sites, we have extended an enrichment interest survey to all of our extended learning families to try to gauge interest. The results from the survey are really going to propel and push what our spring 2023 enrichment offerings are in the program. And in addition to that, we're looking at doing an enrichment program pilot that will allow students not currently registered for the extended learning program to register for our enrichment. Extending registration parameters is going to allow us to boost our participation rates, which means we can offer a more equitable offering across all 4 of our extended learning programs. And that's pretty much the big enrichment update. In terms of rates and fee structures for extended learning, Mr. Milgren will provide a recommended proposal to the committee for consideration for FY24.
Thank you very much.
I think we can pause for questions.
Sorry. I was just wondering if the 2 enrichments that you offered in the fall, if they're going to continue in the spring, or is it like different in the fall and spring? Does it switch up?
So part of our enrichment survey was actually seeing if families would be interested in double sessions.
Oh, okay.
Usually I try to offer something that's more STEM-based, art-based, theater-based, and physical movement-based. That would be the goal, to have each of those for the full year offered. But in that survey we did ask, would you be interested in participating in, again, any of the things you already have? and we'll kind of go based off of those numbers.
Got it, thanks. All right.
If you don't mind, I want to jump down to actually strategic objective 4 under the updates on strategic work. And that's where you'll see that we have secured Ms. Hannigan and also being our communications coordinator for the district. And she is got a background in publishing and editing, along with some talents in branding that have been very helpful to us in our strategic plan work. So we're able to come to an agreement on adding those job responsibilities and staying within the scope of her job as well, and in those the previous ranges that the personnel subcommittee had established. So I want to welcome you and thank you for joining us. I am so happy to have you on board as the communications coordinator. We'll be organizing a time with Ms. Cohen and also our representatives from Skanska as we execute our strategies around the school building project, because a big focus, while Ms. Hannigan is going to help us with our weekly communications, the big focus is going to be the school building project. We need to get that information out, get it out timely, get it out regularly, and she has some skills, particularly around those social media channels, that help us do that. So thank you for taking on that responsibility.
Very excited. That's great. A couple of big hats to wear. Wonderful. Any questions on that new development? Well, welcome aboard again.
Thank you.
Very excited.
Yeah, very
to have
excited.
you.
That's fantastic. All right.
Forgive me. Here I go with a little scratch in my throat. Okay, so extended learning update. I want to talk a little bit about foundation enrollment prior to the school budget workshop next week. And just to remind everybody, next week is not a presentation of the budget. It's the beginning of the construction of the budget. We do not get, as we talked about tonight, like healthcare reimbursements and those types of things. We don't have those today. Chapter 70 funding, minimum local contributions to towns. The past 2 years, those have come in the last week of January, which is a fairly good timeline. They tend to come in. We're hopeful that Governor Healy and her team are prepared and are going to be able to get those things out in a regular way that the previous administration has. But that all being said, some things that we're talking about around the foundation enrollment and the 5-year rolling averages that are used to construct the assessment liabilities for the towns. The variable portion of that assessment that always comes under some questions and scrutiny has been based upon the enrollment numbers that our business office, along with our technology department, in gathering that information around students we have a fiscal responsibility for. Whether they attend Nesova schools or they attend somewhere else, we own a fiscal responsibility to them, so they are thus included in the foundation enrollment. And our numbers every year, when Chapter 70 reports on that, our numbers are always off by a portion. It seems to be somewhere, 15 to 20 students per town. School districts report all their information as SIMS, and so the state has the benefit of having all those numbers together, can aggregate them, and then they get their number there. We have to go hunt, find, chase down people, chase down districts, get information. So there's always been a discrepancy from those two. Mr. Mulcairn and I, you might remember this, Mr. Haresh, we had this conversation, I think, in budget warrant one time. I think we even discussed it in the RAAC meeting one time, the Regional Agreement Committee meeting. Moving forward and how we're going to be crafting the budget is we're going to bring forward next week our same model that we use to project those numbers, but we're going to clearly label them as a projection. And when we get the enrollment numbers from the state that they use specifically for minimum local contribution and Chapter 70 state aid, we will then adjust our numbers so they match identically to the state numbers. Because we just think that is going to help people that are trying to follow the ball on how those calculations are made, that when we say foundation enrollment in one area, it means the same thing when we use it in another area, and those numbers reconcile and match exactly. So Me being in my second year, Mr. Mulcairn in his first year, we think this is a practice we're going to implement now, and we think it probably should have been implemented long ago. But so when you see the enrollment calculations next week, 2 weeks, it will be clearly marked as a forecasted, and then we will be using the enrollment numbers straight off of the state aid reports that we get, the Chapter 70 reports for the previous 4 years. So I'm notifying the committee now, so those enrollment numbers won't look identical to the last year's enrollment numbers. They're very much in close proximity. I mean, I think it's in 0.12 of a percentage point difference.
It was a small, I think the greatest was like 0.04.
Yeah.
As a variability.
So the variance was somewhere around $40,000 in the $62 million budget. But we just think it's good practice. If the numbers say one thing here, they need to say the other thing here. So just know that's how we're going to be bringing those numbers forward next week. I'll pause there.
Just a point of clarification. Are the forecasted numbers that we're going to use, do you expect them to be the more conservative of the two numbers, or is it just simply too early to tell?
It's too early to tell. And we're always really, really close. It's just never an exact science. So for instance, we have, if you have a student who, let's say a student attends a school system, but they're not school of choice, right? They go to another, let's say they go to Sudbury to school, but it's not school of choice. Their school district would allow it. Well, that school system gets to count that student under their cap because they take on the fiscal responsibility. We don't send money to them, right? So the state easily gets access to the information. We actually have to go solicit. And right now, every school system is driving each other crazy because we're all sending our notices out to the other school system. Give us your numbers. I get several emails a day from other school systems. Send us your numbers, What we can get out of our system based on the practices that we have in our technology office, get us really close to the number. When we get the state aid number, we just make the minor adjustment to it and say that's the hard number because that's what it says on the state aid report. And then the enrollment calculations align identically with that. Okay. And then next, for some updates on our strategic work, I think I will turn it over to Assistant Superintendent Friend.
Routine learning. Everything's advice. So we're pleased to present 2 updates on strategic work this evening, both in support of strategic objective number 2, which is our learning, teaching, and leading strategic objective. The first is related to a recent grant that Neshoba has received in the amount of $4,500 through the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education's MyCap implementation grant, and this is going to mark the initiation of a multi-year initiative in support of future programming in support of our high school. And the purpose of the MyCap targeted grant opportunity is to provide districts with supplementary support to build a focused and student-specific scope and sequence beginning in middle school to allow students an opportunity to really discover their interests and their passions and their talents, which is really what middle school is all about. But it gives a defined process by which students are able to do that and then take and carry that forward into high school in terms of planning and then acting upon it post-high school. So the scope and sequence that would be involved in the MyCap implementation planning would be this discover, plan, and then act in terms of 3 phases. The implementation grant supports work relative to the Innovation Pathways programs that I presented to the committee before that are in the works during our professional learning time at the high school with our late starts. It's a prerequisite for those innovation pathway opportunities. So the grant is going to support stipended work for teachers in year one. So we will be in year one this year. And just in terms of planning and doing a deep dive around needs and what it could look beginning at the middle level, support of stipends for 15 educators across the district, 7 through 12. And we're looking at a time frame of summer academy. I'd like to give a shout out to Jody Specht, who is the guidance counselor department chair at the high school, who brought the idea forward to me and helped write the grant and has really been involved in spearheading the idea that this is going to be a really good thing and really help support that the work we're doing in terms of visioning and educational opportunities for students that are really student-centered and focused, that tie into their interests and wants and are relevant to real-world applications. So we're excited about this initiative, which will mark a multi-year initiative and implementation, but this will just be the planning phase. And we're excited that we got a grant to help support stipends for teachers to engage in that work. The second topic is our Portrait of an Neshoba Graduate Voices from Alumni update. And if you're on social media, I'm hoping that maybe you've seen it.
Not on social media, so.
So the Department of Teaching and Learning is currently seeking to connect with Neshoba alumni to hear from them. Specifically as it relates to what are they up to and what skills and competencies have they found to be particularly useful that they learned at Neshoba, and or what skills and competencies do they wish maybe that we had supported them a little more with. So hearing directly from our graduates. Alumni are encouraged to complete a form that's associated with the solicitation on social media. It's a short one, and asked to share their perspectives via an array of opportunities, whether it's an in-person interview, audio recording, a written statement, a short video recording of themselves. Tell us what it is that we think we should know. And we are looking to, one, use that information to help further inform our curriculum audit, provide our teachers with that information. And we're also going to be putting together a culminating video montage with all of these voices and sharing it with staff on our March 17th full day professional development day as part of our keynote and kickoff, and tie in with our Portrait of a Neshoba graduate work. So right now we have 28 respondents to the survey, which is great. And yesterday, Melissa Foley-Procco, one of our English teachers at the high school, had invited 5 graduates to her broadcast journalism class. So went over there yesterday and was able to interview those 5 graduates after they spoke to the class, and they provided some really wonderful insight, and we're really appreciative of being asked. And so it's exciting work, it's in process, and we look forward to using the information to help inform our curriculum development and share with our teachers. And it's always great for teachers to hear from former students. So we'll also look forward to sharing the video montage with the committee when it's completed as well.
I'll wrap up the superintendent's report with the last piece, but before I do that, any questions from Ms. Friend?
I did wonder if we were getting a range of responses. Like, are we only getting things from kids who are going to certain types of school? You know what I'm trying to say? That's kind of what I wonder about when it's like that, is if we're kind of going to hear from the same.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
So in addition to this, the social media launch, which was our first step, Jody Specht is also emailing directly students, graduates 2014 to 2022 directly, and we're mindful of that. One of the students who presented the broadcast journalism class went directly to career, and so we're wanting to make sure that we have a absolutely a wide representation of our graduates because we recognize different pathways for different students are important. Yeah. It's a great point.
Okay.
Can I ask another question about that? Is there a specific prompt that goes along with that or something that focuses it?
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm happy to share the solicitation, and there's a form linked in the solicitation that's all tied into our Portrait of an Ashoka graduate competencies, those skills that are part of our competency work. So the focus for feedback is all related to that, and there is an opportunity for an open-ended opportunity for students to tell us what advice do you think we need to know and hear as we work towards continual improvement. But it is focused on the competencies.
So there's questions or something in there that gives them something to focus on, a response on.
Correct. Yeah, but I'm happy to share that with the chair to be shared with the committee, if that would make sense.
Are you just looking for like 2014 and beyond, or are you looking earlier?
We're looking at the past 10 years.
Okay. So like you don't want parents that went to, okay, got it.
We did have a student who reached out who missed the cutoff by 1 year. Of course we want to hear from you. We're very flexible and open-ended if one wants to share, of course.
All right, great. Thanks, Lori.
Leah, can I just ask a question? Go back to the MyCap for a minute. I
Of
just had a
course.
question. I'm just curious about the implementation plan. So this is for grades 7 and up. So is the vision that it would start with this spring 7, 8, 9, or and then work its way up as kids move through the grades, or is it straight through? Like, I'm just curious how that kind of progresses.
I think that's what we're going to work to figure out.
Oh,
Once we're engaged in it, that will be the work during summer academy.
got it. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Oh, Chandar, excuse me.
Also a question about that. As a grant, do we have to vote to accept it as a school committee? I thought I saw that.
I don't believe so, no, because it's not in the same sense that it's a gift. Is that where you're?
Well, in the Mass Seat training, I thought I heard that I went through that the school committee had to approve grants as well.
I don't think I've ever voted on a grant in all my years, but we can
I'd be
double-
happy to look more into it, though. Maybe certain types of grants, but let me find out.
I think the language I saw was educational grants. I'll try to find my notes and send it together.
Yeah, so maybe you guys could circle
Yeah,
back.
we'll definitely look into that.
Yeah.
Yeah, in my experience, we've never voted on grants, but I hear the point you're making. Let's take a look at that.
All right, moving on.
Okay, the last piece on here, in your packet, and forgive me, Madam Chair, it's on the agenda twice, we will only do this once.
Oh, fantastic.
You have a job description for a Director of Digital Learning and Intervention. It should have like big watermark that says draft on it. So forgive me for not getting the draft piece on there. I'm putting this in front of you today, not because I'm asking for a vote on this today or even in the next meeting, but I'm giving it to you because next week in the budget workshop, you're going to hear more about this position and what we're looking at for a Director of Innovation and Digital Learning. It is cited and noted as one of our priorities in the strategic plan around how to lift the practice of our educators and also how to work with our students on innovative thought processes, building competencies. And so we need a leader in this area that can bring that expertise to our district. It's something that's needed now. I think one of the things that we cite with our technology is we don't want our technology to be just sort of the pencil of today, but yet we still operate in a fixed industrial style way. We need to be thinking about what are practices beyond technological practices, innovative in terms of how students are interacting as well. So this job description is a job description I brought to the personnel subcommittee, and certainly would love a chance to come back to it again. But you're going to see it presented in the budget workshop next week. It's going to be presented in a cost-neutral way, so it wouldn't be an additional cost to the school system. And I just wanted you to just have a little bit of schema going into that. So this is not a final product yet. It's going to be vetted out some more. We want to run it through some of our leading colleagues of digital learning and innovation across the state. What I've learned is that these job descriptions, I have not found two that are alike. They are very different based upon the needs of various school systems, and this title of innovation and digital learning director is interpreted in 1,000 different ways. So it's really a very need-based in terms of what it is that we see we're going to have. So this will come forward next week, and I just wanted you to have that information in anticipation of that.
And just so that you guys know, we have policy that says all new positions are approved by the school committee, and then the personnel subcommittee recommends to the school committee a salary range. So when you come to the personnel subcommittee to formalize this, we will then make a recommendation to the full school committee to approve it or not. Okay.
And that concludes the report.
Fantastic. Just a quick, any questions on that last piece? Chandra?
Do you want any feedback on the job description now, or?
I think the
Would you
best way
rather us
to
hold
do
off
that,
on
Mr. Simon, is to provide to the personnel subcommittee, and then that's the channel in which we vet out the detail on those various things. I think that's probably the most proper channel to do that with.
Yeah, so we'll alert you guys when it comes to the personnel subcommittee so that you know it's on our agenda and you can send along public comment. But do you have a question?
No.
Oh.
I was just gonna say, or just shoot an email now, and then when it comes up on our agenda, we can
Yeah.
deal with it, so it doesn't get forgotten.
That's fine.
So on the superintendent update, and I asked this question, I'm going to ask two questions, I'll pause in between the two questions. We did ask this question at the personnel subcommittee meeting, but I feel like it ought to be asked again. There are actually two new positions on the superintendent update, only one of which is a vote is required. The communications coordinator and then the director of innovation and digital learning job description. Can you just identify the difference between those two and why you're seeking a vote for one but not the other?
Thank you. That's a great question. The communication coordinator is not a new position. It was something that was in the strategic plan actually as a communications director. What we were able to do is identify the scope of some communication needs we have right now. Knowing we have Ms. Hannigan as an expert, she's already employed under her current job description. It's the purview of the superintendent to adjust and change and work on job descriptions as needed. She had the skills and the background to do that, so we've added those responsibilities in a side letter to her contract. And so she's taking on those additional responsibilities. And so it is not a new position. It's just folded into a current position for which she had capacity to take on those responsibilities. And I want to be clear about that. It's not a full-blown director of communications position that looks at all the communications across the school system with all of our various schools and things of that nature. Oftentimes you see school systems even have their directors of communications, also their PR people. They're the front people to the media and things like that. That is not what this is. It's to help us really with the greatest focus on the building project, but then also with our weekly communications. Whereas the director of digital learning is a new position. We have curriculum director job descriptions already in there, so we even had some debate if we bring this forward to the school committee. I think it should be, because while it is a quote-unquote curriculum director position, it is cited in our strategic plan. It does imply working on some instructional best practices and data analysis and some other things that come into this that aren't strictly curriculum. So a little more complex. I think it's good practice to bring it before the committee for approval. And I think the scope of that would be to bring it forward at the budget workshop as a need, And then as we go through the budget process, when it's time to actually execute the bottom line of the budget and vote the budget, would be the time to vote on the position, which gives us a little more than 2 months to put the finishing touches on there, make some appropriate adjustments, and do some more vetting.
Great. Yeah.
And again, you were saying that this is budget neutral because you're going to be repurposing
Yes.
some positions that already exist.
I don't want to show all my magic tricks
Right.
before we come to the budget workshop, but yes, we're doing some things with our current administrative staffing that's going to make some room for this.
And that sort of leads to my second question, which you essentially already answered, that this isn't just finding money, this is reconfiguring.
Yeah.
And can you just address that a little bit in a little bit more detail? I mean, you said you don't want to show all your cards, and I understand.
Yeah, I will be providing specific detail of the FTE allocations at the budget workshop on January 18th, so that everyone in the community can see that, so that our finance people and our town people can see that as well. But yes, it is going to be coming out of currently staffed FTE that we have in the administration sector of the organization to pay for. So we will not be asking for additional FTE for this position.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. So that is the superintendent update. We are now going to move on to our new business. With our eye on the clock, we do want to just kind of move as swiftly as we can without squelching debate. Let's move on to the extended day and preschool fee review structures or proposals.
Sure, absolutely. While Superintendent Downing is bringing it up, I'll just give you a quick overview. So for the extended learning rates proposal, met with Bridget Hannigan, who was here earlier, and went over the current rates, previous increases, and we're essentially proposing the same rate increase of 3% in our monthly rates for both the morning program and the afternoon program. This would be at all sites. This would be for anywhere between the 1 to 5 days, so that's essentially what we're doing here. And again, this is to account for a couple of things, but obviously increasing in salaries for staff, and then also they pay a small portion of the offset for utilities, for example, in the afternoon or in the morning as they use the space. So it helps in a couple of different areas, but the majority of it is just is the personnel component.
Yeah, the only question I have is, when will families be made aware of the rate changes before they enter the lottery or choose to enroll their students?
So my understanding would be that we'd be able to provide this to families as soon as it's voted upon, and Bridget would take that upon herself to communicate through her channels that she has already established with families already enrolled in the program, and we post it to her website as well.
Okay, thank you.
So we would take the vote on February 1st, is what I expect. Does that make sense? And so that works.
February
1st is when we would vote, which would then give the office, if we approve it, the green light on February 2nd to alert everyone.
Yep.
Okay.
Scott?
I think there's an error in here.
Go ahead, let me know.
So I think the before school rate for 3 days is too high.
I can confirm with what she sent to me.
So it's a very linear progression from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5.
Mm-hmm.
And it should be 8:13 or something in that neighborhood, not 8:43.
I don't know if this matters, but as a parent who used this program, I do know that there is an economy of scale in these prices where if you use it more,
No,
that it was cheaper.
But not the before school rates. Or sorry, not in the other one. I think it's the after school. It was pretty, like you said, it's pretty linear.
But do you know what I'm saying though?
I do,
Not
except the
from-
math doesn't.
Not from monthly to yearly, but if you use it 3 days versus 5 days, it's cheaper if you use it 5 days.
Oh, that's what was
Still
really
not
my,
working?
my question too. I mean, if you scroll down to the other, and so 1 day a week is $81. Multiply that by 5. So there's no incentivization, and maybe that's intentional.
I can't speak to that specifically. I can certainly ask Ms. Hannigan. I do wonder if this is not also a function of the increase just changing over time. And so the original set point, when you're adding 3% each time potentially, or whatever it was in the past, that maybe that's a function of what that is, but I can certainly look into it.
It's all very linear, and that's an anomaly.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Well, it's wrong for 2 days too.
No, we appreciate you pointing that out. Great.
Okay. So those are the proposals for extended learning. Preschool?
So in meeting with Mrs. DeAngelis, our PPS director who oversees our integrated preschool program, essentially this is the same thing that we've done with the extended learning, is a 3% increase, which was also the same increase we applied from FY22 to FY23.
So the half-day rates are half of the full-day rates. Is half a day half of the hours of a full day?
Not necessarily, because you don't have that sort of time in between. So typically, I believe it's a 2.5-hour program for the morning or the afternoon, whereas for the full day preschool, it's closer to the 6.5 hours.
Any questions? All right. Thanks for that, Ross. Appreciate it. And if there is an anomaly, perhaps you could just alert us by email or...
Yeah, some clarification in the chair.
Yeah, that would be great. Okay. All right, moving on to our next item here. That is the Hale, I believe, the Hale DC trip donation. All right.
So on behalf of Mr. Grady from the Hale Middle School, there's been a gift donation in the amount of $1,200, which is to be provided to offset the cost of the trip for students and families who've requested financial assistance. Obviously, with like any field trip we do in our district, we let families know if there's a reason why they would not be able to pay the full amount, that they can reach out to the building principal to have a discussion. And obviously, someone has very generously donated $1,200 to the Hale Middle School specifically for this purpose. I think we live in a very generous community of 3 towns, and we see this typically year to year when the DC trips come up. And this is no exception to that, and obviously it is going to be a great benefit to students at Hale Middle School who are in need.
Perfect. So we'll take a motion on it.
I'll move to approve the gift donation in the amount of $1,200 to Hale Middle School to help defray the cost of the 8th grade DC trip, intended to pay for the cost of the trip for students and families who requested financial assistance.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All right, so all in favor? Unanimous, I think. Yes. All right, everybody. So we are very appreciative to that donor and grateful. Thank you. All right, so now on to not the presentation of the new job description. We're going to leapfrog over that.
I'll do it again if you like.
No, we're good. To unfinished business, and we're going to begin with taking a vote for the new policy KCD, public gifts to the school. I'm going to turn it over to our policy chair, Ms. Devine. What can you tell us, if anything, that's changed?
Minimal changes since the last time we looked at this. The only change to the red line is you'll see there in blue at the top paragraph at the end there, no extensive advertising or promotion may be involved in any donation to the schools without the approval of the school committee. So we added that piece in, and then we also updated the source because the date was pretty outdated. So we updated that as well. And Ross, thank you for getting back to me about the limit. Ross was able to he did hear back from the auditors that there's no Mass General law that states a threshold to use, but based on the size of the show, by $500 would be appropriate if we had a threshold. This version does not have a threshold.
Do you have a clarifying question?
Well, to Shander's point, this says all grants and gifts to the district shall be reviewed and accepted by the school committee before expenditure or use. So.
We haven't approved it yet.
Again?
Yeah.
I'm just saying that you brought up a good point, that this policy does say that we are supposed to be approving grants. So
I just wonder what the word grant truly means, and if it's in the vein of what we were talking about earlier.
Well, now you're gonna have to start defining the word grant.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But this looks like it was a change
Yeah,
to the
it-
policy too, so
it
maybe we
was.
don't
It's
need to
something-
have grants in there. All gifts to the district shall be reviewed, unless it's required by law that we're approving grants. So,
So are you saying, Amy, that you would like to table this until Ross can clarify the grant piece?
I think that probably makes
I
sense.
think that makes sense.
We also have to clarify whether this is policy KCD or KDC. On the agenda, it's listed as KCD, and on the file, it's KDC.
It's DC. That's the agenda is.
Oh, okay.
The agenda is
That's just the
correct.
agenda is incorrect.
Okay.
It
okay.
is filed
Reversed letters.
KDC.
Okay.
All right, so,
I don't know why there's a dash in the word promotion, but it's bothering me greatly. And I mix that as a teacher, I'm like, what?
And also, it was like,
Bring it up.
Why is that there?
And in the final version, there's a dash in appropriate.
I
what
just
she was
checked
just
it, I'm
saying.
like, what? So that would be, okay, thanks.
I think you also want to make sure you're not eliminating MASC as from the source material in the red line. It looks like that was the.
Oh, the
Doesn't
word
say the same
MASC.
thing.
Yeah.
so Amy, would you like to make a motion to table this to appreciate?
Sure, I'll make a motion to table this pending information from our business director.
I'll second that. Discussion? All in favor?
Yep.
All right, thanks, guys. So, KBC lives on.
Sorry, lives on. We're in a holding pattern that we should have, so we're good.
Welcome to policy. I feel like I'm always a thorn in the side of policy.
That's okay. There's nothing for us to do till we know more, so it's all good.
So, next item in unfinished business is a vote on the building rental rates review, which was presented to us in a previous meeting. And so maybe we can just start with a motion for that. Mr. Horish.
Sorry, you caught me off guard.
I'm sorry.
I will make a motion to approve the building rental rates as presented.
Wait a second.
Second.
Thanks, Amy. Amy Bessel, second. Any discussion?
Yes, Madam Chairman, I just have some things. And I'm going to speak not in my capacity as a school committee representative, but more in my capacity as a taxpayer and a resident of the district. And I don't have any preconceived notion that what I'm about to say will be embraced by my fellow committee members or be popular, but I feel compelled to say this. And I intimated this at the last meeting, and I will re-intimate my concerns regarding the fee schedule. In regards to the work that has been done by the business office, it's not about the rates themselves. My concern is that you've created a bifurcated fee schedule where you bestow favorable status on not-for-profit organizations, whether they be 501c, tax-exempt, nonprofit organizations. The concern I have, again, as a member of the president of the district, is that there are nonprofit 501c3 and tax-exempt organizations currently utilizing the facilities of this district that, in many respects, historically and contemporaneously, do not embrace some of the core values of this district. When this issue was brought up at our last meeting, Ms. McCarron was keen to point out that one of the organizations that utilizes our district that sometimes pay a nonprofit rate and sometimes has provided free use of the facility are our Cub Scout and Boy Scout organizations. If anybody takes 5 minutes to research the Cub Scout and Boy Scout organizations online, you will see that this is an organization that has been given carte blanche by the United States Supreme Court to not, in fact, embrace the core values of this district. We allow the Cub Scouts, and I don't know, the Boy Scouts, we allow this organization to recruit from within our school. Students are provided flyers, I believe, that go home with the students to join these organizations. And I'm not here to rail against either the Boy Scouts or the Cub Scout organizations. I know in many respects they do good work. But again, if you look at this organization, just as by way of example, you'll see that this is an organization that has historically discriminated against people who are homosexual, people who are atheists, people who are disabled. They are essentially been provided this authority because they're a private organization. They're allowed to associate with the individuals that they so choose. So I think, and I would suggest is I'm going to vote no on this. And again, I don't have any preconceived notion that this is going to be embraced or, looked upon, favorably. But I think the easiest and simplest solution to avoid scrutiny, and as a resident of the district, I would scrutinize how the district utilizes its facilities and how it bestows favorable status upon certain organizations. My desire would be essentially to see one uniform rate for all users. In that regard, we don't have to go through any sort of assessment or vetting of organizations. And I know that the district doesn't want to do that, and frankly, I don't think the district should have to do that. I don't think they should have to look at each organization that comes to utilize the school's facilities and say, well, you guys do this, you do that, maybe that's not consistent with our core values. I think the simplest and easiest solution is to simply create one uniform rate. We don't care whether you have profit or nonprofit, we don't care what your altruistic views are in life, this is what we pay, we don't make no exceptions across the board. So in that regard, Madam Chair, I would vote no on the facilities rental rate as presented, or I would intend to vote no for that particular reason. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Anything else for discussion?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
At the bottom there, where it says 15% camp gross revenue, I wasn't at the meeting where this was presented. Can you tell me what that is?
So my understanding, and I haven't been through the billing process over the summer, for example, but if a camp were to use, ABC baseball, as a native example, wanted to use our facilities for 4 weeks in the summer to run a for-profit baseball camp, our expectation would be that we would ask for 15% of the camp gross revenue.
I understand. And is that different from a program that is run as part of the district?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So I think I remember reading that if a group is part of the district, then they have access to the facilities without a fee. Is that correct?
Yeah, so if you're talking about our extended learning, so again, what goes in through, if our extended learning, because they do run some summer programming right at the end of the school year, so that revenue goes in and could be a potential offset source that we sort of stipulate through the budget process. So if our budget offset for a fiscal year is to say, $50,000 from the extended learning revenue would go towards utilities. It could be from the camps, it could be from the general enrollment in the daily program.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Scott?
I'm afraid I'm about to jump down a rabbit hole, and I apologize for that. But the idea that we have a carve-out for camps begs the question of what the definition of a camp is. Is there any program that runs when the school is not in session? And then, so does that mean that our rates when the school is not in session are different? Or do we need to define what a camp is? How do we segregate that?
My cursory understanding would be that if a group comes in and wants to use our facilities to run a camp, and I think most of them are defined as camp, that's what would apply. And I think sort of past practice around certain groups that come in and typically, rent our facilities during the summer, it applies that way. I would have to research further to get a more finite answer.
And I just have one more. Yeah. I'm a little puzzled by Joe's comments, because it sounded like he made them as a board member, as a committee member, but he prefaced them by saying, I'm doing this as a member of the community. And so I just don't understand what just happened here as far as what his perspective was on all this.
So I think that, I don't want to speak for you, Joe, and you can certainly jump on here. I think that everything that's said at this table is ultimately said as a committee member, especially as we're about to take a vote. But I think that, Joe, I heard you say that you would feel this way if you were a
Yeah,
resident looking in.
my comments were based, not so much, I'm not looking at this from the perspective as a committee member. I don't, to be fair to Mr. Mulcairn and to the business offices, what they've done here is wonderful. I'm just looking at it from my personal perspective, saying, as a resident of the district, I don't embrace the notion of this bifurcated, more favorable status fee schedule. And in that regard, I have the added bonus of being a member of this committee and therefore can vote in regards to this matter. And if it will be of any comfort or will mollify any concerns of my colleague, I will amend my comments to say that not only am I making these as a resident and taxpayer of the district, but also in my capacity as a district committee member sitting with the Neshoba Regional School District representing the town of Lancaster, Massachusetts.
Thanks, John.
And that, I'm sorry, I just had one quick comment to Mr. Mulcairn. And not trying to be flip here, but it strikes me that why we don't need to sort of wring our hands over what a camp is. As far as I'm concerned, it's whatever Mr. Mulcairn says it is. If Mr. Mulcairn says it's a camp, they pay the 15%. I mean, I think it's an exercise in futility to try and define that. You know, it's like, you know, it's a duck. If it sounds like a duck, it walks like a duck, it's a duck. And Mr. Mulcairn, I think, is well qualified to determine whether it's a duck or it's a camp or whatnot, so.
All right, does anybody else have anything in addition to this? Because we are going to take a vote. All right, so if you are in favor of the fee schedule as presented, please raise your hand, yes. But objections are noted. Anybody against? Very good. No abstentions. All right, thanks, Joe. All right, moving on to our next item on the agenda. Just keeping in mind, guys, that 9:06 is the time. We are almost done, but it is our practice and our policy to make sure that everybody is okay to keep going with the meeting and not vacate at 9 p.m. when we all are supposed to turn to pumpkins. Is everybody okay with keeping on going here? All right, fantastic. So we're gonna. No.
Actually not. I've got to do something, yeah.
If you need to leave, you
Is that
can.
okay?
You can.
Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
our quorum still is okay. Okay. That we will miss you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll see you later. All right, so we're going to go on to the subcommittee and advisory reports here. So budget and warrant report.
Just a small report. We reported last meeting that we had a meeting on December 8th. We reported on that meeting. And given that the budget workshop is slated for January 18th and the plethora of agenda items that we have, we are going to do double sessions. We're going to do a January 17th session that will focus on one of our subcommittee goals, which is OPEB, and a couple of housekeeping things. And then we will have a post-budget workshop meeting sometime in the second half of January. So just keep that in mind, especially if you are part of the public wishing to be a part of that. No.
I said show off.
No.
What's in your subcommittee muscle?
No.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. Over to communication.
So a couple of things have come together for the communication subcommittee in the last few weeks. One of which is that I believe that Superintendent Downing is going to create a subcommittee or a school committee corner, yes, in the newsletter that goes out from his office. So that will accomplish the goal of getting information about what the school committee is taking up, information about what the school committee has done, and all of those things out as part of the weekly newsletter that comes from central office. And we have something else, but my name has lost you for a moment. Hold on.
Is it the school committee manual? School committee manual?
Well, that is, yes, that is that is coming up as well, but there was something else that we accomplished. I just can't remember what it is right at the moment.
I have a quick question for you, maybe this will jog your memory. On the stuff that we're gonna be putting into the common, which is Kirk's communication, will you guys develop that little square of information?
I believe that Kirk was going to develop that square
I
of
think the
information.
idea is just going to be around this as we're forecasting out the meetings. Here's what you would expect on the meetings and what's coming up.
I remember the second thing, which is that another goal of the communication subcommittee was that we were trying to create a way for people to easily reference or find things information that had been presented to the school committee at meetings. And so that is something that can easily be added. And I think any of us could probably do it if we felt like it was something that was important, and we wanted to make sure that that was able to be posted to the community, that we could just ask for that to happen, and probably Alita would magically make that appear in the correct section of the
We have our materials that are posted in the school committee
website.
agenda. We know we have some workshopping to do around what do we warehouse in terms of putting on, the quote-unquote transparency page of things, because, or would we just be creating another fog of minutia in a whole different category, and we don't want that. So we have some organizational planning to do around that.
Thanks, Sharon.
And then moving forward, the communication subcommittee as well as policy is going to be working together on the school committee manual. Yes?
Potentially.
I think that's it.
Awesome. Thanks, Sharon. To the school building committee.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just to bring the committee up to date, on the 21st of December, the Board of Directors at the Massachusetts School Building Authority held their monthly meeting and unanimously approved the preferred schematic report of the district, and we are now ensconced in Module 4 of the build project. I want to thank Superintendent Downing. He was there on behalf of the district, along with Ms. Williams from Skanska, myself, and I believe, did we have anybody from KBA there? I don't remember if anybody from KBA was at the...
Mr. Olson was present.
Mr. Olson was present, okay. Yeah. Mr. Superintendent Downing did all the speaking, so it was a long meeting, but it was unanimously approved, and we had some very glowing commentary regarding the educational plan that was submitted, and per the email that I received from Superintendent Downing today, apparently they're going to be using that as an exemplar moving forward for other school districts. As far as the committee is concerned, we are scheduled to meet this Thursday. It will be a light agenda. Our legal counsel will be present to discuss the legalities attendant to the funding of this project. I will remind all of you that the 9th is going to be our next public forum on the funding of the project. We have requested, I am requesting, the administration is requesting, as many of our district committee members as well as our building committee members to be present at that meeting. And Superintendent Downing, I just wanted to preface something moving forward. I'm sorry that Mr. Frieswick is not here, but I want to thank him publicly, and I'll do it again tomorrow night. He was kind enough to provide myself and Mr. Simon with an intimate, behind-the-scenes view of the high school building facilities. And I only bring it to your attention because I'm not holding anybody to any dates, but we are planning on having 2 dates sometime this year. I've heard varying months on this, but we are in the planning process of scheduling those walkthroughs, facilities tours. And I will just finish by saying that even if you've been in the high school and you think that you are intimate with the facilities, you are not. There are, and I mentioned this in an email to the superintendent, there are parts of that building, parts of that campus that I am sure that we have cradle to grave employees who have never been to and have never seen. I don't know how many have been in the pump house. I don't know how many have been out to the maintenance shed, to where the incinerator used to be. And I am praying for rain on both the days that they schedule those walkthroughs. You will not believe what you will see when it's raining inside that building. So with that, Madam Chairman, I'm with my report.
Thanks, Joe. Very telling. Personnel.
Personnel will meet a week from yesterday, so no report today.
All right, great. Over to policy. Anything else, Karen?
Policy has not met since our last meeting, so we'll be scheduling our next meeting soon, connecting with communication and personnel on the manual. And that's it.
Working on Katie.
Working.
We should establish another subcommittee just for
Or Casey.
Not it.
So, over to advisories. What were you doing audit?
No update. Ross, I do need to reach out to you to work on dates.
Yep, no problem.
Okay, great. The DRJ.
DOJ met twice in December. Superintendent Downing and Assistant Superintendent Friend met with us the week before the break. And DOJ is working on, or is aligning the projects that they will bring forward and choose to work on themselves with the website.
Oh,
what we worked on last spring. My brain is really not working. It's late.
It's late.
Come on, we made this document last spring.
Equity audit presentation?
Well, they are going to work on that.
The DRJ stuff? Strategic planning work?
Strategic plan.
very good.
It's 9:15, Sharon, it's okay.
Thanks, Sharon. They're working on aligning the projects that they bring forward with what is in the strategic plan. And I am all tied. You're done.
May I get just a little bit of color to that?
Of course.
We're going to have a couple of representatives from the DRJ committee be part of the RFP review when those submissions come in. So
Yeah,
are we out? Are we?
My understanding is, yes, we have posted where necessary according to Chapter 30B for the RFP for the equity audit, and we'll go from there.
Fantastic. Great. Thanks, DRJ. Over to CPAC.
CPAC did not have their regular meeting this week. I think they're having an executive session meeting at another time. But there is an upcoming presentation on the 23rd. It's basic rights, understanding the IEP. I think it's put on by the Federation for Children with Special Needs. I want to say it's at 7 o'clock, but I couldn't find it before I got here, so I would have to confirm that.
January 23rd? Okay, great. The Regional Agreement Amendment Advisory Committee, RAAC, has no update, although right before this meeting started, I did see that I got an email back from Desi with comments on the latest round, so I will wrestle that beast tomorrow. Items for next agenda. Anything else that you want to add to the planning calendar? I'm not sure. Oh, it's just the budget
Budget
workshop.
workshop, the next agenda item.
No adding anything. But if you guys see something that you want to be added to February 1st, please let me know. Oh,
Sorry.
Maureen
There's a
wants to
lot of chatter in Stowe right now about the changing of the bus routes. I'm not sure if that should be a policy discussion at some point in the future. Obviously not next meeting because budget.
So this is definitely something that is Ross is wanting to respond to.
If it would be okay, could I
Please
just
do.
interject? So on the district website, under the transportation, which is through our office, there is a transportation questions, concerns protocol that folks can follow, which various steps. If they have questions or concerns after first step, then it's the second step, and then it will be the third step. So I would encourage people in the public and families to follow that process in order for communication chain and concerns and questions to go through that process.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. Yeah, and I think that with regard to bus operations, it's really outside of the school committee's purview, but we can certainly rely upon you guys to address the concerns that are brought to you through that communication train.
Definitely. If they use that practice and that process, that is the best action they could take. So that would be appreciated.
Okay. Yeah, I think it was more just around timing of communication, so go through that.
All right, great. So everyone, I am going to move to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Fantastic. Thanks, guys. Well done. Thanks, Nikki. Thank you.